I remember the wind first. It moved through the funeral tents like a hand trying to sweep a secret from the world. I stood at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in a threadbare brown coat, a small bag heavy on my shoulder, feeling like a ghost who had slipped into the wrong life. The mourners around the golden casket spoke in hushed tones and prayed in soft syllables, certain that the most powerful woman on the island, Victoria Hale, had been taken from them. The casket lay above an open grave like I had heard the plan the night before beneath the bridge where I slept, a car idling, voices sharp in the dark. They spoke of slow-acting poisons and quick burials. I had lost a family once to silence and inaction. That memory burned in me. I could not let another human be buried alive. When the pastor lifted his Bible and the grave workers moved to loosen the ropes, something in me snapped. I pushed through the crowd and shouted, "Stop! Do not bury her." For a beat, the world held its breath. Phones lifted to record the spectacle. Faces turned, some in disgust, some in curiosity. A guard searched for me. I felt the weight of their stares, a homeless man disrupting a billionaire's farewell. But I was not there for spectacle. I was there to break a grave that I reached the mat where Victoria lay. Her skin was pale and still, cotton in her nostrils, lips closed as if sleep had nailed them shut. Leonard, her husband, stood rigid nearby, a handkerchief folded in his fist, his grief a shape he practiced. He barked for the guards to remove me. "You will respect the dead," he said, his voice practiced that I did not answer him. Instead, I spoke to the body under the lid. "She's not gone," I said. "They gave her something to slow breath. She's alive if we wake her." Whispers rippled. An elderly woman, Victoria's aunt, stepped forward. "If there's a chance, we must check," she said. Leonard was impatient. He called me a madman and gestured for security. But doubts spread through the tent. That pause gave me my chance that I knelt and folded my coat into a pillow. I slid my hand beneath Victoria's neck and felt, astonishingly, a faint warmth. The cotton was removed. I took from my bag a small vial, remedies I had kept for years. People leaned in. Some cursed. Some prayed. "One drop," I said. "We must be careful." They assisted awkwardly. The aunt pried Victoria's lips open. I touched the dropper to her tongue and released a single bead. First, nothing happened. The sun shifted and the light felt cruel. Then a soft noise came from her chest, a cough so small that many thought it was wind. Her fingers twitched. Her lashes fluttered. The room convulsed with sound. Prayers, gasps, weeping. Her eyes opened to a world that had almost buried her. They fell on Leonard with a raw question. "Why?" she whispered. The single syllable landed like an accusation. Leonard moved like a cornered animal. He drew a syringe from his jacket. The motion was quick, ugly. Two men lunged. The syringe skittered across the concrete. Leonard screamed, "She belongs in the ground." Guards wrestled him down. Dr. Morris, the family doctor, paled. His guilt showed on his face. When the police arrived, the scene became trial. Cameras framed Victoria not as untouchable, but as a woman twice stolen from life. First by a toxin that mimicked death, then by the grief that would have buried her alive. The courtroom was packed. Witnesses dismantled the defense. Toxicology confirmed a paralytic agent. The driver testified about the private exam. The doctor's fear was exposed. My intervention, the voice that stopped a funeral, became a hinge. They called me Samuel Cross, and the name felt, impossibly, like mine. Victoria spoke with rage braided to clarity. She accused Leonard and Dr. Morris of betrayal. Leonard's defense crumbled in the face of evidence and testimony. In the end, both were convicted. The gavel fell with the finality of a door closing. Then something unexpected happened. Victoria offered me a life. Not charity, she insisted, but a place and purpose. She wanted me to work, to be visible again. "You saw," she said simply. "You spoke." Reluctantly at first, I accepted. I began helping in small ways at Anderson Holdings, restoring corrupted files, organizing reports, tasks that used a life I had thought ruined. It was humbling and healing that I told her about the bridge, about the car and the voices, about the night I had lost my wife and child. She listened without pity and with a strange kindness that cut through shame. "Stay," she said. "You did not look away. Love found both of us in separate ways. I met Juliana, patient and steady. We married and had a son, Jonathan, who woke the world with his small, insistent hands. Victoria found George, who admired her strength rather than her fortune. They married. Children came. The mansion that had once smelled of marble and power began to smell of nursery powder and laughter. Years later, on the 10th anniversary of Victoria's survival, she stood and spoke about forgiveness. She forgave Leonard, not because she diminished the crime, but because she would not let hatred be her second prison. He was released after a decade, a hollow man who watched her life go on in a small rented room, and, perhaps, finally understood the cost of his hunger. But I sometimes wonder whether prison taught him anything. Sometimes I think cruelty can be reduced only by emptiness and time. But what I keep is not his fate, but the miracle that followed that day in the tent. I, once broken, once invisible, was given a life of purpose. I learned to tend to a company's chaos, to hold a child, to let love rebuild small rooms in me. The smallest gestures meant everything. A hand held, a meal shared, the sound of shoes on a terrace at dusk. If asked whether I would risk everything again for a stranger, I would say yes. Some truths are louder than fear. A single voice can tip the scale between burial and breath, from the cold mat beside the casket to the warm light of a nursery. The road taught me how fragile trust can be and how stubbornly human beings can recover. The wind still moves through the trees, and when it reminds me of that I know this. Once you choose to speak, you change the world beneath your feet. The trial days stretched long. Every morning the press trailed us. Every evening the headlines carved our names into the public mind. Under bright lights, I watched Victoria reassemble herself with a dignity that made me ashamed of my private cowardices. She spoke about small compromises that became monstrous, and I began to see how ordinary favors had become weapons in a marriage built on entitlement. After the trial, away from cameras, she asked about my life. I told her I had once been a software engineer, proud and steady, until loss reduced me to the margins. She listened and then asked me to stay, not as charity, but as part of a life she wanted rebuilt. So I started restoring corrupted servers, cataloging legal disclosures, learning to be useful again. The work was humbling and healing. Outside the mansion, the city's gaze shifted. People who had crossed the street to avoid me now nodded. The strange fame settled into something quieter, the responsibility of being visible. Children would whisper, "That's the man who stopped the burial." And I would smile, feeling something human stitched back together. Forgiveness remained a process. Victoria did not forgive Leonard overnight. When she finally spoke of forgiveness on the 10th anniversary, some called her soft. She said forgiveness freed her. She used her influence to fund medical oversight and to create grants for ethics training, small structural changes tied to the day a man in a tattered coat refused to be silent. Juliana and I filled the house with ordinary joy, late breakfasts, toys on the floor, bedtime stories. Jonathan's laugh erased the sharp edges of old days. Victoria found love again with George, a man steady in his quiet. They married. Our families braided together. One evening. Years later, magnolia trees heavy with scent. Children chasing fireflies. Victoria squeezed my hand and said, "You were the voice that would not be quiet." I thought of the cold mat beside the casket, of the dropper, of the cough that sounded like a rebirth. I thought of the wife and child I had lost, and of the second chance I had been given. If asked whether I would risk everything again, I would say yes. Because silence is dangerous. One voice can tip the scale between burial and breath. From that tent to the nursery's warm light, my life became proof that from the ashes, dawn will come.